Welcome back, students. In this short video, we are going to learn the viva on the thoracic vertebra, and this time the viva on thoracic vertebra may be in relation to how you will identify the atypical thoracic vertebrae. Now, the atypical thoracic vertebrae, as I said in the last video, are the thoracic one, thoracic 10th, 11th, and the 12th. These four are the atypical thoracic vertebrae. And then he can ask about the first thoracic vertebrae. This is the first thoracic vertebrae, and teacher may ask you how you will differentiate that this is the first thoracic vertebrae. You can say quickly that here the body is not like that of thoracic, which is heart shape. The body is that of similar to that of the cervical, where anteroposterior diameter is less than that of the transverse diameter. And then you can say that there is a single large facet on the body, okay, for the head of the first rib. Here this single large facet is there for the head of the first rib is there. And then there is a demi-facet also, which is very small but present near the lower border of the body. See this demi-facet? This is for the upper facet of the head of the first rib. But then don't forget to say that there is a large facet for the tubercle of the first rib. Again, both are the costal facet. Facet on body for head of the rib and facet on the transverse process for the tubercle of the rib. So this is the second characteristic of the first thoracic vertebra. Then you can also add that in comparison to this is a typical thoracic vertebra, and you can see here the vertebral foramina, and you compare the vertebral foramina of the first, you will see that it is quite large and triangular in shape because the pedicles are directed backwards and laterally. Okay, then he can also ask you about the features of spinous process. So this first is also identified because of the spinous process. In a typical vertebra, here is a typical thoracic. You can see that it is pointed spine which is long and directed downwards, inclined inferiorly. But here you will see that the this spinous process is almost horizontal, like that of the vertebra prominence of the seventh cervical vertebrae. So these are the identification points on the basis of which you can say that this is the first thoracic vertebrae. Then another thoracic vertebrae comes is that of the 10th thoracic vertebrae. I don't have the 10th thoracic vertebrae, but it has a differentiation point, that is its body is not like that of the thoracic, it is more towards that of the lumbar type of the body is there, and there is a single costal facet, okay, on the lateral surface. If you see, there is a single costal facet for the head of the 10th rib, okay, it is for the head of the 10th rib, right? Then again the spine is not that much inclined and it is changing itself, but there is not much very sure short identification point for the 10th vertebrae. Then what you may go, that means he may give you the 10th vertebra and can ask, let me find, he may give you the 11th thoracic vertebra. So we are on now the 11th thoracic vertebra. The identification point of the 11th thoracic vertebra will be that it is lumbar type. It is almost lumbar type, and then you can see that its superior articular facets are also that of the thoracic type, okay, in the 11th thoracic vertebra. Transverse process, they are small knobby like structure, and then there is a single facet onto the surface, okay, onto the side of the body it is overriding over the pedicle, okay, single. There is no demi facet near the inferior. This single articular facet is for the rib of the 11th rib, which will articulate with that of the near the body, and pedicle with that of the 11th thoracic vertebrae, 11th thoracic. So except that the body which is somewhat similar to that of the lumbar type of there, this transverse process are small, okay, and otherwise there is not much difference. Yes, there is one more. There is no facet on the transverse process because the 11th rib is a floating rib. Its tubercle is not there and it will not articulate with the transverse. So there is no facet, okay, except one single facet on the body. There is no costal facet onto the transverse process, and superior articulate facet, they are thoracic type, okay, they are thoracic. Then we come lastly on to that of the 12th thoracic vertebrae. This is usually asked for its identification. How you will identify the 12th thoracic vertebrae? Now this 12th thoracic vertebrae is identified, as I said, with the help of the body of these. Okay, this is the lumbar type of the body is the of the 12th thoracic vertebrae. Then costal facet, see a large costal facet encroaching onto the pedicle, okay, and more towards that of the superior border of the this body. Then this is for the head of the 12th thoracic rib, head of the single. Again there is no costal facet on the transverse process because 12th rib is also the floating rib, okay, and it will not articulate with that of the 12th transverse process, okay, on the transverse process. But when you will see the transverse process of 12th, which is much more the identification point will carry, is that the transverse, though the superior articular facets of the T12, they are that of the thoracic type, but when you will go to the inferior articular facet here, they are absolutely lumbar type. So this inferior articular facet, when they are lumbar type, it means that they are facing laterally, but the superior articular facet, they are the thoracic type, they are facing posterolaterally. So this is very important. The articular facet superior are thoracic type, but inferior are the lumbar type. And I was telling you about another important identification is in the transverse. They are very much rudimentary and they usually present three tubercles. See this prominent tubercle? This is the superior tubercle, which represent the mammillary tubercle or mammillary bodies. Then there is an intermediate tubercle, and then there is a very small inferior tubercle on the inferior surface of this rudimentary transverse process. This inferior tubercle represent the accessory process what we get in the lumbar vertebrae, and this intermediate are this lateral tubercle which we get here. It is the true transverse process. Since the transverse process is rudimentary, hence it is represented by the three tubercles. The whole of this transverse process is irregular and very small. Another identification point beside the comparison of superior articular facet with that of the inferior. So within a vertebra T12, the superior articular facet, they are thoracic type, and the inferior, they are lumbar type. The inferior, they are the lumbar lie. So it is not difficult to identify the thoracic 12th T12 vertebra because it articulates with the head of the head of the rib, okay, 12th rib, which is floating. So you can easily identify thus the three atypical, that is the T1, T10, T11, T12, and compare it with that of the with the typical thoracic vertebra, where it has its own usual facet, and that is two demi-facet near upper border and lower border on the body for the head of the upper and lower rib, and then a single facet on the transverse process, okay, and spine is directed downward, the foramina is rounded and very small, okay. So this way I have told you all the features of the thoracic vertebra, both typical as well as atypical, and how to identify it. So this is a short videos or the short revisions for the viva which can be asked. Thank you very much for watching this video.